A friend of mine, let's call him Steve, retired in 2007. He was 62 years old, had worked as a mechanical engineer his entire life, and had managed to scrape together exactly $612,000 in his 401k. He was terrified. He went to a financial advisor who sat him down, looked him in the eye with the gravity of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis, and said, "Steve, listen to me. You cannot spend more than 4% of this money per year. If you withdraw a penny more than $24,480, you will run out of money, you will be destitute in your 80s, and you will die eating cat food in a state-run facility." So Steve listened. He was a math guy. He followed the rules. He withdrew exactly that amount, adjusted for inflation, every single year. He didn't take his wife to Italy like they promised they would. He didn't buy the fishing boat he spent 30 years dreaming about. He drove a 12-year-old sedan that smelled like mildew. He pinched every single penny because he was paralyzed by the fear of going to zero. Fast forward to 2023. I ran into Steve at a coffee shop. He is 79 years old now. He moves a little slower. His wife has passed away. He pulls out his phone to show me a picture of his grandkids, and I catch a glimpse of his Schwab account balance. $1.8 million. He has been spending money for 16 years. He has been retired through the 2008 crash, the 2020 pandemic, and the inflation of 2022. And somehow, he has 3 times more money than he started with. Steve didn't win the game of retirement. Steve lost. He lost 16 years of experiences that he can never buy back. He traded his health, his energy, and his dreams for a safety buffer that was mathematically unnecessary. He is going to die the richest guy in the graveyard. And that is a tragedy, not a success story. Here is the thing that makes me angry. Steve's story isn't rare. It is the default. I started digging through academic papers, money manager reports, and real account data from BlackRock and Vanguard. Do you know what I found? Roughly half of all retirees, following the so-called safe withdrawal rules, end up with significantly more money than they retired with. Not slightly more, double, triple. Which raises an incredibly uncomfortable question that the financial industry is desperate to avoid. If the 4% rule is supposed to be the gold standard of safety, why does it leave so many intelligent people swimming in cash they will never be able to spend? Today, I am going to show you why the math behind retirement planning is fundamentally broken. I am going to expose how the incentives of the financial industry, the advisors, the funds, the banks, are aligned to keep you scared and hoarding cash. And I am going to break down the specific psychological trap called hyperbolic discounting that makes rational people starve themselves in their 60s to feed a version of themselves in their 90s that might not even exist. Let's start with the central metaphor that explains this madness. Retirement planning is like packing for a camping trip where you don't know if you are going for 3 days or 3 weeks. The 4% rule is the guy who brings 47 MREs, 6 tents, a generator, 3 water filtration systems, and a satellite phone because he read one article about a guy who got lost in the woods in 1926. Sure, he will survive. He is definitely not going to starve, but he is going to be miserable carrying a 100-pound pack up the mountain when a sandwich and a water bottle would have been fine 95% of the time. The 4% rule was invented by a financial planner named William Bengen in 1994. He wasn't trying to optimize for happiness. He was trying to optimize for survival in the apocalypse. He ran historical simulations going back to the 1870s. His question was simple. What is the absolute maximum percentage Someone could withdraw from their portfolio every year, adjusted for inflation, and never run out of money, even if they retired at the absolute worst possible moment in American history. His answer was 4%. But here is what nobody tells you. That 4% number was designed for the person who retired right before the Great Depression. The person who retired right before the 1973 stagflation crisis. Bengen was building a rule that would work 99.9% of the time. That isn't safety. That is paranoia with a spreadsheet. Think about this through the lens of insurance. You don't buy enough life insurance to cover the scenario where you die, your spouse dies, your kids get sick, your house burns down, and aliens invade simultaneously. You buy coverage for realistic bad outcomes. But retirement planning has somehow convinced an entire generation to insure themselves against financial asteroids that statistically almost never happen. Now, you are probably thinking, okay, Max, but isn't it better to be safe than sorry? Isn't it better to have too much money than too little? This is where the psychology gets dark. There is a concept in behavioral economics called hyperbolic discounting. Humans are terrible at valuing future experiences. We would rather have $100 today than $110 next month. But in retirement, we flip this. We are so terrified of being poor at 85 that we sacrifice real, tangible experiences at 65. We forget that our ability to enjoy money has an expiration date. It is a biological reality called the smile curve of spending. In your 60s, you are in the go-go years. You can hike Patagonia. You can walk around Paris for 8 hours. You can play golf. Your health allows you to convert money into memories efficiently. In your late 70s, you enter the slow-go years. Maybe you travel, but it's a cruise, not a hike. You eat out, but you don't stay out late. By your 80s, you are in the no-go years. You have money, but you don't have the mobility or the energy to use it. $1 million at age 85 buys you a very nice nursing home, but it cannot buy you a trip to Machu Picchu. The 4% rule keeps you pinching pennies during your highest quality years, the go-go years, because of a theoretical bad scenario 3 decades away. It forces you to delay gratification until you are physically incapable of being gratified. Let me tell you about another guy I used to work with. Let's call him Spreadsheet Dave. Dave had a $400,000 portfolio. He ran Monte Carlo simulations weekly. I am not exaggerating. Every Sunday night, he would adjust his grocery budget for the week based on whether the S&P 500 was up or down. He wanted a 100% success rate on his retirement plan. You know what happened? Dave died at 71. Pancreatic cancer. Gone in 3 months. He never took the trip. He never bought the car. He never did the things he deferred. His kids inherited $380,000 because he had been so conservative with withdrawals that he barely touched the principal. Dave optimized for a 100-year lifespan and got 71 years. That isn't financial planning. That is dying rich and living poor. But here is where the data gets undeniable. A researcher named Michael Kitchis, one of the few honest voices in this industry, analyzed historical withdrawal rates going back to 1870. He looked at rolling 30-year periods. You know what he found? In only 12 out of 115 periods did a retiree following the 4% rule end up with less than they started with. 12 times. That is a 10% failure rate on the upside. 90% of the time, you finish with more money than you retired with. 2/3 of the time, you more than double your wealth. Half the time, your wealth triples. Read that again. Half the time, If you retire with $600,000 and follow the 4% rule, you end up with over $1.5 million. You spent money for 30 years and still tripled your net worth. This isn't a glitch. This is what happens when you build a withdrawal strategy around the unlucky guy from 1929. For everyone else, you are massively overshooting the runway. Now, here is the kicker. The financial industry knows this. They have known it for decades. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, published a report analyzing real client accounts, not simulations, real human beings. They found that 40% of retirees had 100% or more of their original principal after 18 years of retirement. They weren't even spending the interest. They were living like monks while sitting on a dragon's hoard. Why doesn't your financial advisor tell you this? Why did Steve's advisor tell him to starve himself? Here is where the incentives get fascinatingly corrupt. Financial advisors are generally paid a percentage of assets under management, AUM, usually 1%. If you have $1 million portfolio, your advisor makes $10,000 a year. If you spend that portfolio aggressively and enjoy your life, and it drops to $500,000, your advisor now makes $5,000 a year. His income just got cut in half because you decided to go to Hawaii. Do you see the problem? The advisor's financial interest is directly opposed to you spending your money. They are financially incentivized to keep you scared, keep you conservative, and keep that pile of money as big as possible so their fee stays as big as possible. I am not saying advisors are evil people, but the business model has a structural conflict of interest. It is like asking a barber if you need a haircut. The answer is always yes. Asking an AUM advisor if you should spend your money is asking them to take a pay cut. So, the advice trends conservative. Not because it's optimal for you, but because it's optimal for the business model. Let's run a real scenario with actual numbers to show you what freedom looks like. You retire at 67 with $600,000. You are married. Between you and your spouse, you are getting $4,000 a month in Social Security. That is $48,000 a year. That alone covers your survival expenses: food, utilities, property tax. The poverty line for an elderly couple is roughly $20,000. You are already double that just from the government. Your portfolio is allocated 60% stocks, 40% bonds. You want to spend $5,000 a month total. That leaves a gap of $1,000 a month you need from your portfolio. $12,000 a year. That is a 2% withdrawal rate. If you run this through a simulation, the probability of you running out of money is 0. It is mathematically impossible unless the United States government collapses, in which case your dollars are worthless anyway. You could double your spending, take out $24,000 a year, and your probability of failure is still statistically insignificant. Yet, most people in this scenario would still be terrified to spend that extra $1,000 on a nice dinner or a plane ticket. They are trapped in a scarcity mindset that no longer applies to their reality. This brings us to the concept of regret minimization. Retirement planning should not be about portfolio maximization. It should be about regret minimization. What is going to cause you more regret on your deathbed? Scenario A. Running your portfolio down to $200,000 at age 85, but having spent your healthy years doing everything you ever dreamed of. Scenario B. Dying with $1.2 million in the bank and a list of trips you never took, hobbies you never started, and experiences you deferred until it was too late. For most rational humans, Scenario B is the nightmare, but it is the nightmare the financial industry pushes you toward every single day. Imagine being Bill Bengen. the guy who invented the 4% rule. He wrote a book recently where he admitted that if you are willing to be flexible, if you are willing to spend less during a market crash and more during a boom, the safe withdrawal rate is actually closer to 5.5% or 6%. That is a 50% raise. That is the difference between surviving and thriving. That is the difference between a Toyota and a Porsche. But we don't hear that. We hear 4%. We hear safe. And we lock ourselves in a cage of our own making. I have a friend who is a hospice nurse. I asked her once if people on their deathbeds ever regret spending too much money. She laughed. She said she has never heard that once. Not one time. What she hears constantly is regret about hoarding, regret about waiting. I should have taken her to Paris when she could still walk. I should have bought the cabin when the kids were young. The people who spent their money on experiences tell stories. They reminisce. They are at peace. The people who saved everything are bitter. They feel like they worked for nothing. They feel like they were tricked. And they were. They were tricked by a system that values capital accumulation over life satisfaction. So here is your permission slip. Here is the strategy to break out of the trap. 1. If you have Social Security or a pension, you have a bond. You have a safety net. Count that as part of your conservative allocation. That covers your baseline. Your portfolio is for living. It is for the level 2 spending. Travel, hobbies, joy. 2. Use a flexibility rule. Agree with yourself that if the market drops 20%, you will cut your spending by 10% that year. Just that one simple rule eliminates almost all the risk of running out of money. It allows you to spend significantly more in the good years because you have a plan for the bad years. You are a human, not a robot. You can adapt. 3. Adopt the die with zero mindset. You don't have to literally hit zero, but stop viewing a declining account balance as a failure. It is a success. It means you are using the fuel you stored. If you drive a car from New York to California and you arrive with a full tank of gas, you stopped too many times. You wasted time filling up a tank you didn't need. Retirement is the drive. The money is the gas. Use it to get where you want to go. The people who retire with 600,000 and end up with 2 million aren't lucky. They are victims of bad math. They are victims of fear. Don't be Steve. Don't look at your bank account at 79 and realize you are rich in dollars and poor in memories. Buy the boat. Book the flight. Take the risk. The math says you are going to be fine. The only thing you can't afford is to wait.